used in the xanthoprotect test is HNO3. The second is Hopkins cold test. Hopkins cold test. See what the Hopkins cold test will do is Hopkins cold test will detect indole ring. Hopkins cold test detects indole ring. Now indole ring is a structure which is only found in tryptophan. Indole ring is a structure which is only found in tryptophan. So I can say Hopkins cold test detects indole ring which is found in tryptophan. So if they ask that for tryptophan, which test can be done? For tryptophan, Hopkins cold test is done, and what it is going to identify, it is going to identify the indole ring. In the other way, the question can be asked is indole ring is found in which amino acid? Indole ring is found in which amino acid? The answer is tryptophan. So they can ask this question in both the ways. The third is Sakaguchi test. Sakaguchi test detects guanidinium group. Guanidinium group. This guanidinium group is found in this guanidinium group is only found in arginine. So I can say which is found in arginine. And this was asked in your exam. The language of the question was guanidinium group is found in which amino acid? Guanidinium group is found in arginine. They have not asked about Sakaguchi test. What they have asked is an indirect detail of Sakaguchi test that guanidinium group is found in which amino acid? That is arginine. Next is ninhydrin test. Ninhydrin test. Ninhydrin test detects free amino group. Ninhydrin test detects free amino group. So any amino acid, if the free amino group is not present, ninhydrin will be negative. Yesterday when we have started, we have discussed three definitions in the beginning: alpha amino acid, chiral carbon, and amino acid. In the amino acid, we have written that the amino group is not present, the amino group is not free. So what was the example of amino acid? The example of amino acid was proline. And in the proline, because it is an amino acid, the amino group is not free. So if they ask that ninhydrin will be negative for which amino acid? Ninhydrin test is negative for proline, because proline does not have free amino group. Proline is an example of amino acid. I hope you have revised your notes. So you will be able to correlate the thing that why I'm saying that ninhydrin will be negative for proline, because it does not have a free amino group. Last is Milon test. Milon test detects phenol group. Which is found in tyrosine. So again, there can be two ways to ask the question. Milon test detects what? Detects phenol group. Milon test, or which test can be done for tyrosine to identify the tyrosine? Milon test can be done. So these are the various details that you need to remember. There is nothing much to explain in this. You have to remember this, all the 5 names. There is no need to go into detail that how these tests are performed. The next definition that we need to discuss is the concept of buffer capacity. Concept of buffer capacity. So to understand buffer capacity, let's say there is a solution. Let's say this is water, and this water is having a pH of, let's say, 7. Now what we do is we add a base we add a base to this solution, or I can say to the water, then the pH will shift towards the basic side. The pH will shift. As you add the base, the pH will shift towards the basic side. Let's say another scenario. Now this time what we do is we take the same water which is at a particular pH. Now before adding to a base, what we do is we add a special molecule. We add a special molecule in the solution. Then I add the base. Then what I will notice is this time the pH will not shift. The pH will not shift. Whether I add acid or I add base, the pH is not going to change. It will remain the same. This is the property of this particular molecule which I have made in the green color. What this molecule is doing, basically it is resisting the pH change. Resisting the pH change. This property of resisting the pH change, this property is known as buffer capacity. So what is basically buffer capacity is any molecule which will resist the pH change. So buffer capacity is resistance to pH change. Resistance to pH change is called as buffer capacity in the simple words. We cannot change the pH easily. You need to add a lot of acid or base to change the pH. A related concept is related to buffer capacity is something called as Zwitter ion. Zwitter ion. What is the meaning of Zwitter ion is? Let's say again, we are taking a solution. This can be any solution, can be carbohydrate, can be amino acid, any solution. And this solution will have a particular pH. Let's say 6, 7, whatever the number is. We take a special molecule. Currently, there is no charge. Currently, there is no charge on this molecule Z. No charge. I add this Z molecule into this solution. When I add the Z molecule to this solution, what I notice is there is formation of one positive charge. There is formation of one positive charge. At the same time, there is also formation of one negative charge. So what I am noticing is there is equal amount of positive and negative charges generated on this molecule Z, which was not having any charge. When I have put this Z on a certain pH, there is equal amount of charges generated. This molecule which contains equal amount of positive and negative charge, this is called as Zwitter ion. So the definition of Zwitter ion is a molecule which carry equal amount of positive and negative charge. Molecule which carry equal amount of positive and negative charge. If they ask what is the net charge on Zwitter ion, the net charge is going to be 0. Net charge is 0. There is equal amount of positive negative charge and the net charge is going to be 0. And this molecule is called as Zwitter ion. Molecule is called as Zwitter ion. The point is on the pH where the Zwitter ion is formed, the pH where the Zwitter ion is formed, this pH is called as isoelectric pH. Iso means equal. At this pH, we are going to generate equal amount of electrical charge. Isoelectric pH, the pH on which Zwitter ion is formed is called as isoelectric pH. Called as isoelectric pH. There is a calculation to calculate the pH. There is an equation to calculate the pH. The formula of pH is pH equal to pKa. This is a constant. log of total amount of base divided by log of total amount of acid. The equation is not important. What is important is the name of this equation. This equation is called as Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. So what they can ask is which formula is used to calculate the pH, and they will give this name, Henderson-Hasselbalch. So to calculate the pH, Henderson equation is used. To calculate the pH, Henderson equation is used. So this was the general concept regarding the buffer capacity and Zwitter ion and the buffer capacity. Next thing is that will be a reaction. This is the first reaction that we are going to discuss in biochemistry. The reaction that we are going to discuss is decarboxylation of amino acid. That will be the first reaction for us in biochemistry. Decarboxylation of amino acid. So basically what we are going to do is we are going to remove the carbon dioxide. Decarboxylation means removal of carbon dioxide. Removal of carbon dioxide, that is called as decarboxylation. So I will take an example of decarboxylation and that will make more sense. Let's say for example glutamate. Glutamate is amino acid. If I do the decarboxylation reaction on glutamate, what I need to do is I need to remove the carbon dioxide. If I remove the carbon dioxide, the name of the enzyme is going to be decarboxylase. Decarboxylase. Because we are doing decarboxylation of glutamate, so the name of enzyme will be glutamate decarboxylase. This is the enzyme that is required for decarboxylation. At the same time, we also require a coenzyme. The coenzyme that is required, that is written in the form of PLP. PLP. PLP stands for pyridoxal phosphate. What is this pyridoxal phosphate? Is basically active form of vitamin B6. The name of vitamin B6 is pyridoxine. The active form is called as pyridoxal phosphate. So whenever we are going to do decarboxylation reaction in amino acid, decarboxylation of amino acid, what is the coenzyme? The name of the coenzyme is PLP, that is pyridoxal phosphate. The name of enzyme is not important because it's very self-understood. If you want to do decarboxylation reaction, you require decarboxylase. So when you do the decarboxylation reaction with the help of PLP, that is pyridoxal phosphate, glutamate will convert into GABA. Glutamate will convert into GABA. From your physiology knowledge, you may be knowing that GABA is a inhibitory neurotransmitter. GABA is an example of inhibitory neurotransmitter. GABA is an example of inhibitory neurotransmitter, whereas glutamate is an example of excitatory neurotransmitter. So a simple decarboxylation reaction in the brain will convert excitatory neurotransmitter glutamate into inhibitory transmitter, that is glutamate into inhibitory transmitter, that is GABA. So this is one of the example of decarboxylation reaction of amino acid. If I add one more example, this is the first example. Let's see. The second example that we can add is if you take histamine, histidine. If you take histidine, yesterday we have discussed histidine as an essential amino acid, histidine. And if we do a decarboxylation of histidine, so the enzyme that is going to be required is histidine decarboxylase. and we are also going to require PLP, that is the coenzyme. In any decarboxylation of amino acid, we are going to require PLP. Histidine will convert into histamine. The question that was asked in your exam recently was, when histidine converts into histamine, what is the name of reaction? When histidine converts into histamine, what is the name of reaction? It is a decarboxylation reaction. When histidine converts into histamine, the name of reaction is decarboxylation reaction. Few more example, but the first two are the important ones that you must remember. Remaining is just to complete your notes. If you take tyrosine and you do the decarboxylation reaction, it will convert into tyramine. Decarboxylation of tyrosine will convert into tyramine. Tryptophan. Decarboxylation will lead to formation of tryptamine. If we take lysine amino acid, decarboxylation will convert into cadaverine. If we take serine, decarboxylation of serine will convert into ethanolamine. So these are the various examples of decarboxylation reaction, but the first two are the important ones. Whenever I say important, mark them and put more attention while revising the notes on those points. Because when we will complete the entire biochemistry, that will be a long journey, and when we will complete, you will notice that from day one, if you will start revising, you will notice that there are a lot of information, and we are unable to focus on the information which is more important, because the content or the bulk of the content will lead to will be missing the important information because of that. So these are the various example of decarboxylation reaction. Now we are going to start the metabolism of amino acid, the general metabolism of amino acid, that is called as biosynthesis of urea. How the amino acid are metabolized in our body by synthesis of urea. This will be the general metabolism of all amino acid. All the amino acid are going to enter in this pathway ultimately, sooner or later. Just a second. Okay, there was some problem. Okay, now I think my screen is visible and I'm audible as well. So what I was saying to you was that the different amino acid we are going to convert into glutamate, and that glutamate will reach all the way till your liver, and in the liver we are going to take out the ammonia. We are going to take out the ammonia, and that process is called as oxidative deamination. One more scenario is at the tissue level, there are some pathway that is going to occur and that can generate in trace amount ammonia directly. There are some pathway which can generate a very small amount of ammonia directly in the tissue, a very small amount. Now what we need to do is we need to transport this ammonia all the way from the tissue to liver, because the conversion of ammonia to urea can occur only in the tissue liver. So we need to transport this ammonia which is there in the liver, which is there in the tissue. So how we are going to transport this? Because it is a free ammonia, we cannot transport this directly, because if this ammonia will come in the blood, then it can reach to the brain and can lead to encephalopathy. So what we need to do is we need to take this molecule of ammonia. So we use special transporters. We use special transporters. These transporters are going to transport the molecules of ammonia. Different tissue will have different transporters. So the step 3 will be, in the step 3 we are going to discuss various transporter, means from one particular tissue, one particular type of transporter will transport the ammonia. With the help of transporter, these ammonia molecules will reach all the way. This ammonia molecule will reach all the way to the liver. So the basic thing in the step 3 is we are going to discuss various type of transporters. So once all the ammonia has reached in the liver, we have loaded the liver with ammonia. This ammonia is supposed to convert into urea. Ammonia is supposed to convert into urea. Conversion of ammonia to urea, that will be the step 4, and that is called as urea cycle. So with the help of urea cycle, we are going to convert ammonia into urea. This urea will travel via blood all the way to the kidney, and via the kidney, the urea will be excreted out. So this is how the amino acid is going to convert into urea. So basically there are 4 steps. The 4 steps are highlighted in the black color. First, we need to convert all the amino acid into glutamate. The reason we are converting into glutamate, because the glutamate easily donates the ammonia, and that process is called as oxidative deamination. The third thing that we need to do is there are some free ammonia molecules which are generated, and we need to transport that. For that, we have special transporters. Via that, the ammonia will travel all the way to liver, and in the liver, this ammonia will convert into urea, and that urea will be excreted out via kidney. That will be the step 4. So we need to see the details of these 4 steps. We'll start with the step 1, then the step 2, 3, 4. So the first step is transamination. If the diagram is clear to you, then the further details will be very easy. The ultimate agenda I have made clear, that why we need to convert the amino acid into urea, because the ammonia is a toxic metabolite, and we need to convert this ammonia into urea. So the step 1, we are now going to see the details of each of the step. Step 1 is transamination. Transamination. So the point that we are going to cover in the transamination is we will be having different amino acid, and we need to convert them into glutamate. The reason why we are doing this reaction, because glutamate easily donates the ammonia, right? So what is transamination is basically transfer of amino group from one amino acid to glutamate. We are going to convert amino acid into glutamate by transferring the amino group. The reason why we need to convert into glutamate is because glutamate easily undergoes oxidative deamination. Glutamate easily undergoes oxidative deamination. The oxidative deamination process is very easy with glutamate. So if they ask this transamination reaction is occurring in the tissue or at the in the liver, so by looking at the diagram, you can easily identify that the transamination reaction is occurring in the liver at the tissue level. So I'm writing this statement here. Transamination occurs in all the tissue. Basically, this reaction is occurring at the tissue level. Transamination occurs in all the tissue. The name of the enzyme for transamination reaction is transaminase. The name of the enzyme for transamination is transaminase. This transaminase is also called as aminotransferase. Transaminase or aminotransferase. It's just the active and the passive form. Transaminase, aminotransferase is the same. Basically, we are going to transfer the amino group. The coenzyme for this reaction is very important. The coenzyme for decarboxylation was vitamin B6. Here also, the D coenzyme is vitamin B6, which is also written as PLP. In the beginning of the session, I have told you PLP stand for pyridoxal phosphate. Pyridoxal phosphate. So the coenzyme is important for transamination reaction. The transamination reaction coenzyme is pyridoxal phosphate. If you have understood this point, the second one, why we are doing the transamination reaction, because glutamate will easily donate the ammonia. I want you to understand one more point here is, see, I am saying in the step one is we are going to convert different amino acid into glutamate, and the glutamate will travel all the way to liver and will donate the ammonia. If any another amino acid that can easily donate the ammonia, then there is no point to convert into glutamate. Let's say there is one amino acid that can also easily donate the ammonia. Then this amino acid can directly come to the liver and can donate the ammonia. There is no need of conversion into glutamate. So there are three such amino acids which can directly come all the way to liver and donate their ammonia. They does not undergo transamination reaction. So the name of these three amino acids is threonine, proline, and lysine. See, these three amino acids, what they will do is these three amino acids will directly go to the liver and will donate the ammonia. They will not undergo transamination reaction. So threonine, proline, and lysine does not undergo transamination reaction. Does not undergo transamination reaction. Instead, they directly go to liver and donate their ammonia. Instead, they directly go to liver and donate their ammonia. Threonine, proline, lysine. How we can remember is this is not IPL, this is TPL. Threonine, proline, and lysine. Threonine, proline, lysine, TPL does not undergo transamination. They will directly go to the liver and will donate the ammonia. Let's see some examples of transamination reaction. Example of transamination. Example of transamination reaction. I can say this is the most important reaction of biochemistry. We are going to use this reaction multiple times in different chapters. Examples of transamination reaction. So what we are going to do is, see, whenever we are going to discuss any reaction, what should be very clear in your mind is what is the substrate and what is the product. That is the thing. If you understand in biochemistry, the biochemistry will be very easy. So transamination reaction, what is the substrate will be? The substrate will be a one particular type of amino acid, and the product is going to be glutamate, because we are trying to convert every amino acid into glutamate, and that reaction is called as transamination reaction. So this is the agenda that is going to be that various different amino acid will be there as a substrate, and we need to convert them into glutamate. This is the task. Let's say, for example, there is amino acid aspartate. If I want to convert aspartate into glutamate, the name of the enzyme will be transaminase, because it is a transamination reaction, so it is transaminase. And the coenzyme will be vitamin B6, that is PLP, in the form of PLP, that is going to be there for every transamination reaction. So the glutamate is already fixed. Glutamate is always going to be the product in a transamination reaction. The byproduct of this reaction is oxaloacetate. In all the reaction, we are going to have a same substrate, that is alpha ketoglutarate. One amino acid will be there, and alpha ketoglutarate is going to be there in every transamination reaction as a co-substrate. Alpha ketoglutarate. So this is how the aspartate will convert into glutamate. Aspartate will convert into glutamate, and the byproduct is going to be oxaloacetate. So there are two things which I have highlighted in the box with the blue color, that these two molecules are going to be there in every transamination reaction. For example, let's say I want to convert alanine into glutamate. So always the product is going to be glutamate in a transamination reaction. Glutamate will be there. The byproduct of this reaction is pyruvate. In every reaction, we are going to have alpha ketoglutarate. In every transamination reaction, the alpha ketoglutarate is going to be there. So this is a transamination reaction. The name of enzyme is transaminase, and we are going to require PLP or vitamin B6. So the blue color thing is always going to there in any transamination reaction, whether it is alanine, aspartate. You take any transamination reaction, these two things are going to be there. So what we need to remember is the substrate and the co-product. See, whenever there is aspartate, the co-product is oxaloacetate. Alanine, the co-product is pyruvate. Remaining things will be same. So this is how we are going to remember. The mnemonic that we are going to use is with the name of SOLP. We will be using this mnemonic for multiple times. SOLP. S stand for aspartate. When you convert into glutamate, the byproduct is going to be oxaloacetate. L stand for alanine. When you convert into glutamate, the byproduct is going to be the pyruvate. SOLP. One more additional thing that we can add to this is the name of the enzyme I have written the name of enzyme is transaminase. Transaminase. If they ask what is the specific enzyme, what is the specific type of transaminase that is required for the first reaction, the name of the enzyme will be serum. Now everyone pay attention and follow the green yellow color marker. Serum, glutamate, oxaloacetate, transaminase. That is also written as SGOT. So what is the full form of SGOT? SGOT stands for serum, glutamate, oxaloacetate, transaminase. Transaminase. In the same way, the second one, serum, glutamate, G for glutamate, P for pyruvate, transaminase, SGPT. Serum, glutamate, pyruvate, transaminase, SGOT, SGPT. You may have heard about these molecules, or maybe you have seen in some reports also. They are the component of liver function test, SGOT, SGPT. SGOT, SGPT. Now you know the point that where these two molecules are used in our body, SGOT and SGPT. They are used in the transamination reaction when the aspartate converts into glutamate and the alanine converts into glutamate. So these are the two examples of transamination reaction, and we are going to use these reaction multiple times. SGOT, SGPT. Let's add some more relevance to this SGOT, SGPT. That is just for your clinical knowledge. See, these two molecules are SGOT and SGPT. They are used in liver function test. Now pay attention. See, I can say liver diseases. Liver disease I can divide into two. Alcoholic liver disease, that is called as ALD, and non-alcoholic liver disease. Alcoholic liver disease, non-alcoholic liver disease. So how we are going to identify whether it is an alcoholic liver disease or a non-alcoholic liver disease? First is always obviously the history, the clinical finding, or the laboratory finding that is going to support us is if the SGOT is high compared to SGPT, that is alcoholic liver disease. If the SGPT is high, that is non-alcoholic liver disease. This is an interpretation that can be made from SGOT, SGPT. If SGOT is more high compared to the SGPT, twice higher than the SGPT, then we can say it is alcoholic liver disease. If SGPT is twice higher, then it is a non-alcoholic liver disease, most probably. It is not always true, but most probably this will give you a hint towards the diagnosis. So this is transamination reaction. This is how we are going to convert various different type of amino acid into glutamate. But we need to remember at least two examples, aspartate and alanine. The step 2 is once we have converted every amino acid into glutamate, now this glutamate will travel to the blood via blood all the way to liver, and there it is going to donate the ammonia. So the step 2, if you know the flow chart, then the life will be very easy. So step 2 will be oxidative deamination. Oxidative deamination, we are going to remove the ammonia in the presence of oxygen. So it is called as oxidative deamination. Oxidative deamination. If they ask the place of oxidative deamination, is it the tissue level or the liver? Obviously, it is going to be the hepatocytes. In the hepatocyte, where in the cytoplasm or mitochondria. Make a thumb rule that all the oxidative process occurs in mitochondria, because oxygen is only present in mitochondria, not in the cytoplasm. So if the name of the reaction is oxidative, then it is going to occur in the mitochondria. Whether it is beta oxidation of fatty acid or oxidative deamination, any oxidative process is going to occur in the mitochondria. So what will the reaction? The reaction will be glutamate is going to donate the ammonia. So glutamate will be the substrate. We have transported all the glutamate from the body to liver. In the liver, what we are going to do is we are going to take out the ammonia. We are going to take out the ammonia from glutamate. This is the task, and this process will be called as oxidative deamination. This process is called as oxidative deamination. we are going to use several thumb rules in our biochemistry. This is the first thumb rule that I am telling to you. You can write at the top of your page or in the continuation as well. The thumb rule is, in any reaction, if there is NAD, NADH, in any reaction there is NAD, NADH or FAD, FADH. In any reaction, if these enzymes are, if these molecules are there, in any reaction you see these molecules NAD, NADH or FAD, FADH. If these molecules are there in that particular reaction, the name of the enzyme is going to be dehydrogenase. Dehydrogenase. If the NAD, NADH or FAD, FADH is there in the reaction, the name of the enzyme is going to be dehydrogenase. In the entire biochemistry, we are going to follow the same rule. So this is the first thumb rule. NAD, NADH or FAD, FADH, the name of the enzyme is going to be dehydrogenase. The name of the enzyme is going to be dehydrogenase. So what happens in this reaction is, when the glutamate donates the ammonia, NAD comes into picture and converts into NADH. And whenever there is NAD, NADH or FAD, FADH, the name of enzyme is dehydrogenase. So the name of enzyme is glutamate dehydrogenase. Glutamate dehydrogenase. This is how the glutamate is going to donate the ammonia in the liver. Now, once the ammonia is donated, then the step 3 will be, see what is the step 3. If you see the flow chart, what is the step 3 is basically, we need to transport the free ammonia. I am just scrolling up the information to the flow chart so that you can identify the step 3. I am highlighting the step 3 with the green color. What is the step 3 is, there are some reaction which can generate a trace amount of ammonia in the tissue itself. That ammonia needs to be transported, and we cannot transport the ammonia directly freely in the blood because it is a toxic molecule. So we require a special transporter. Different tissue will have different transporters, and these transporter will transport the ammonia all the way till liver. So we need to discuss that what is the name of the transporter for each of the tissue. This is the main task, to understand in step 3 what is the name of transporters. So the step 3 is transport of ammonia. Transport of ammonia. The first transport that we are going to discuss, transport of ammonia from brain to liver. From brain to liver, how we are going to transport ammonia. See what happens is, let's say this is the brain tissue. In the brain, a very small amount of ammonia can be generated, and we need to transport this ammonia all the way to liver. So what we do is, this ammonia will unite with glutamate. When the ammonia unites with glutamate, a special molecule is generated with the name of glutamine. So when the ammonia unites with glutamate, we are going to generate a molecule with the name of glutamine. This glutamine molecule is a non-toxic molecule. It can travel via blood and it will reach in the liver. When the glutamine reach in the liver, it will donate the ammonia back to the liver. So now you can easily appreciate that the molecules of ammonia all the way from brain to liver is transported via a special molecule in the blood. The name of that molecule is glutamine. The reaction part is not important. What is important is the information which I am highlighting with the green color. So what they will ask is, what is the name of the transporter? of ammonia from brain to liver. Who is going to transport the ammonia from brain to liver? That is glutamine. So I can say the name of the transporter is important. The name of the transporter. If you have understood the entire process, very good. If not, just remember the name of the transporter. The name of the transporter of ammonia from brain and most of the tissue is glutamine. From brain and most of the tissue, it is glutamine who is going to transport the ammonia. In the second example, we are going to discuss transport of ammonia from skeletal muscle to liver. We are going to transport ammonia from skeletal muscle to liver. Skeletal muscle to liver. Let's say, for example, this is your skeletal muscle. From skeletal muscle, we need to transport the ammonia all the way to liver. This is the amount of ammonia that is generated in the skeletal muscle. See, what happens is in the skeletal muscle uses or requires glucose for energy purpose. Skeletal muscles will use glucose. Glucose will undergo glycolysis, and the product is going to be pyruvate. We will discuss glycolysis in detail in the chapter carbohydrate. So when the glycolysis will occur, the product is going to be pyruvate. This ammonia and pyruvate, they can unite and they can generate a special molecule with the name of alanine. This alanine will travel all the way via blood because alanine is a non-toxic molecule. So alanine will travel all the way via blood and will reach in the liver. When the alanine will reach in the liver, it will be splitted back into two. One will be your ammonia and the pyruvate. So now we can say that who is going to transport the ammonia from skeletal muscle all the way to liver, then the answer will be alanine. The answer will be alanine. So I'm writing the information here. Transporter of ammonia from skeletal muscle to liver, alanine. This is asked multiple times in your exam. What is the name of transporter of ammonia from skeletal muscle? And what is the name of transporter of ammonia from brain? From muscle, the answer is going to be alanine. And from brain, it is glutamine. Now, we can complete the cycle in this way that whatever pyruvate is reached in the liver, this pyruvate can be converted into glucose back. Liver has a ability to convert various non-carbohydrate substrate into glucose. If the glucose is formed, this process is called as gluconeogenesis. Because we are synthesizing the glucose, so this process is called as gluconeogenesis. Liver has the capability of doing gluconeogenesis. And this glucose can be sent back all the way to muscle for the energy purpose. If the muscle requires more energy, this glucose can be sent back. Via blood, this glucose can be sent back all the way to muscle. So this entire cycle is called as glucose-alanine cycle. This cycle is also called as Cahill's cycle. Cahill or glucose-alanine same. Cahill or glucose-alanine cycle is same. Cahill cycle or glucose-alanine cycle. So this is the step 3. This is how there are various ways to send the ammonia from the various tissue. If you have understood the entire step 3, very good. If not, I am highlighting the information again. The transporter of ammonia from brain, the answer is glutamine. Transporter from skeletal muscle, the answer is going to be alanine. These two information, that is the must know from the step 3. Then the step 4 will be, once you have loaded the liver with ammonia, we need to convert the ammonia into urea. That is the step 4. So what we are going to do in the step 4 is, whatever ammonia we have accumulated in the liver, by the virtue of the first 3 reaction, we are going to convert that ammonia into urea. This conversion of ammonia into urea, it is called as urea cycle. This urea cycle is also called as ornithine cycle. This ornithine cycle is also called as Krebs-Henselt cycle. Krebs-Henselt cycle. Krebs-Henselt cycle. If they ask what is the place where this reaction is going to occur, the place is obviously is going to be liver. Liver has the only capability of converting the ammonia into urea. If they ask this pathway will occur where, in the cytoplasm or mitochondria, in the liver where it is going to occur, it will partly occur in mitochondria, and partly in cytoplasm. Means there will be few reaction that is going to occur in cytoplasm and few reaction is going to occur in mitochondria. The entire pathway will occur in two places. Some reaction will occur in mitochondria. I can say the total reaction in urea cycle is 5. The total reaction in urea cycle is 5. Out of 5 reaction, 2 reactions are occurring in the mitochondria, whereas 3 reaction is going to occur in cytoplasm. There will be total 5 reaction out of 2. Out of that, 2 will be occurring in the mitochondria and 3 will be occurring in cytoplasm. So now we'll see the urea cycle. So before starting the urea cycle, I want to add one more thumb rule. We have discussed one thumb rule previously, and the thumb rule was, whenever there is NAD, NADH or FAD, FADH, the name of enzyme is dehydrogenase. Again, you can write at the top of your page, or you can write in continuation that the second thumb rule is, see, let's say there are 2 molecules, A and B. These 2 small molecule unites and generates a big molecule. Let's say with the name of C. So I can say this is a synthesis process. 2 small molecules are uniting and making a bigger molecule C. If this process requires ATP, if ATP is required, or I can say energy is required, then the name of enzyme is going to be synthetase. If you are requiring energy for the synthesis of any molecule, the name of enzyme is going to be synthetase. If let's say A and B unites and makes the molecule C without ATP, or without energy, if you are synthesizing any molecule without energy, then the name of enzyme will be synthase. So the point I want to convey by this diagram is, what is the difference between synthetase and synthase? Synthetase is the enzyme which is required for the synthesis purpose, and when the energy is required, we will use synthetase. Whenever you are doing synthesis without using any ATP, then the name of enzyme will be synthase. So this is the second thumb rule that we are going to use in biochemistry, that whenever we are requiring ATP, then the name of enzyme will be synthetase. Without ATP, it is going to be synthase. This is the second thumb rule that we are going to use in the entire biochemistry. So let's see what is going to happen. So I am saying that the urea cycle is a process that some reactions are going to occur in mitochondria, and some reactions are going to occur in cytoplasm, and ultimately the point is ammonia will be converted into urea. Let's see how it is going to occur. First of all, we take one molecule of ammonia and one molecule of carbon dioxide. These two molecules will unite and will undergo a synthesis process. These two molecules will unite and will make a bigger molecule. When these two molecules unites, we require two molecules of ATP, means the energy is required. Two molecule of ATP will convert into two molecule of ADP. These two small molecules will unite and will make a bigger molecule with the name of carboxyl phosphate. Carboxyl phosphate. Because we are synthesizing a molecule with the help of energy, that is 2 ATP. So the name of enzyme is going to be synthetase. The name of enzyme is going to be synthetase. The entire name of the enzyme will be carboxyl phosphate synthetase 1. Because we are synthesizing carboxyl phosphate, so the name of enzyme is carboxyl phosphate synthetase 1. This carboxyl phosphate synthetase 1, it is also written as CPS1. CPS1. This CPS1 is also regarded as rate limiting step of urea cycle. RLS means rate limiting step of urea cycle. Rate limiting step of urea cycle. So the first reaction, one molecule of ammonia will unite with one molecule of carbon dioxide and will synthesize a molecule with the help of energy, carboxyl phosphate. So the name of enzyme is synthetase. The full name is CPS1. There is a molecule which can activate the CPS1. There is a molecule which can activate the CPS1 and can promote the synthesis reaction. The molecule which can activate the CPS1, it is called as NAG. NAG is an activator. NAG is an activator of CPS1. The full form of NAG is N-acetyl glutamate. N-acetyl glutamate. N-acetyl glutamate is the activator of CPS1. This has already been asked. Who is the activator of CPS1 or who is the activator of rate limiting step of urea cycle? The answer is NAG. As I told you that some reactions of urea cycle occurs in mitochondria and some reactions occurs in cytoplasm. So the first reaction that we have discussed, it is occurring inside the mitochondria. So I am making the demarcation. See, for example, let's say this is the demarcation for mitochondria. This reaction was occurring inside the mitochondria. This side is the mitochondria. And out to the mitochondria, outer side to the mitochondria, it is cytoplasm. So now the orientation is very clear that the first reaction of urea cycle is going to occur inside the mitochondria. The second reaction that is going to occur, there is a molecule in the cytoplasm with the name of ornithine. This ornithine molecule which is present in the cytoplasm, it will be transported inside the mitochondrial matrix. It will be transported inside the mitochondrial matrix. To transport this ornithine molecule from the cytoplasm to the mitochondrial matrix, we require a transporter. The name of the transporter that is working at the mitochondrial membrane, it is called as ornithine transporter 1. In short, I have written ORNT1, ornithine transporter 1. With the help of ORNT1, ornithine will be transported inside the mitochondrial matrix. Now what is going to happen is the carboxyl phosphate will interact with ornithine. Carboxyl phosphate will interact with ornithine. Now everyone just follow the yellow color marker. From the carboxyl phosphate, the carboxyl group will be transferred on ornithine. So basically what I am saying is the carboxyl phosphate and ornithine, they will interact with one another. carbonyl phosphate and ornithine, they will interact with one another. When they will interact with one another, the reaction that is going to occur is the carbonyl group will be transferred on ornithine. This is the thing that is going to occur in this reaction. Carbonyl group will be transferred on ornithine. If you are transferring the carbonyl group, the name of the enzyme will be transcarbamylase. Transcarbamylase, because we are transferring the carbonyl group, so the name of enzyme is transcarbamylase. The full name of enzyme is ornithine transcarbamylase, because we are transferring on the ornithine. So the full name of enzyme is ornithine transcarbamylase. In short, it is written as OTC, ornithine transcarbamylase. When carbonyl group is transferred on ornithine, the molecule that we are going to get is with the name of citrulline. So you can easily appreciate I am giving the numbers of the reaction. This is the first reaction that is occurring in the mitochondria, that is CPS1. The second reaction with the help of OTC, it is also occurring in the mitochondria. So the first two reaction of urea cycle is going to occur in the mitochondria. Then the citrulline molecule will come out from the mitochondria. The citrulline molecule will come out from the mitochondria all the way back to the cytoplasm. What is going to happen? The third thing that is third reaction that is going to occur is this citrulline will interact with a foreign molecule that is joining the urea cycle from the outside, that is aspartate. Aspartate is a molecule that is going to join the urea cycle in the third reaction. This aspartate will join the citrulline. So now these two small molecules will unite and will make a bigger molecule with the name of arginosuccinate. These two small molecules will unite and will make a bigger molecule with the name of arginosuccinate. In this reaction, we require energy. ATP is required, and that converts into AMP. Now keep attention, it is not ADP, it is AMP. Adenosine triphosphate is converting into monophosphate, means two phosphate are used. Triphosphate is converted into monophosphate. Triphosphate is converting into monophosphate. So two phosphate molecules are missing. Two phosphate molecules are used. Triphosphate converting into monophosphate. Because we are using energy and synthesizing a bigger molecule, so the name of enzyme is going to be synthetase. So the name of enzyme is arginosuccinate synthetase. Because we are doing the synthesis reaction with the help of energy. So synthetase. This is the third reaction. Then this arginosuccinate. In the fourth reaction, it will undergo a lysis reaction and it will split into two. This bigger molecule will be converted into two smaller molecules. This arginosuccinate will split into two smaller molecules with the name of arginine and fumarate. Arginine and fumarate. Because a bigger molecule is splitting into a smaller molecule, so I can say it is a lysis reaction. So the name of enzyme is arginosuccinate lyase. Lyase. Lyase means lysis. Lysis. Or this enzyme is also called as arginosuccinase. In short, it is written as arginosuccinase. So this is the fourth reaction, and that is going to occur in the cytoplasm. Lastly, arginine, which is again a bigger molecule, will split into two small molecules. One is ornithine. And the second is the desired product that we are willing for, that is urea. Arginine will split into two, ornithine and urea. So a big molecule is splitting into two, and this time we require water. This is not a simple lysis reaction. We are requiring water for this lysis. So this is not called as lysis. This is better to say as hydrolysis, because we are requiring water. So the name of enzyme is arginine hydrolase. Arginine hydrolase, or it is also written as arginase. Arginase. So the first two reaction you can see that they are occurring in the mitochondria, but the latter three, reaction number 3, reaction number 4, and reaction number 5, they are occurring in the cytoplasm. They are occurring in the cytoplasm. First two reactions are occurring in the mitochondria, whereas the latter three reactions are occurring in the cytoplasm. And we have generated the urea molecule, the desired molecule urea. Let's see the points that can be asked from this particular cycle. See, in the exam, no one is going to ask you to write down that in a MCQ exam. No one is going to ask you that write down entire urea cycle, write down entire Krebs cycle. They are never going to ask these things. What they are going to ask some specific questions from a particular pathway. See, in the biochemistry, that the most common problem that the student will face is how many cycles are there, how we are going to remember all the cycles. The point is, we do not have to remember the entire cycle in the same sequence. The reason is, if you are good with the concept, if you know that what the examiner can ask from any particular topic, then you can focus on that particular part only, and then you will not feel you will feel more confident in the exam. So, what are the points that you must know from this particular cycle? So I'm writing the points. You just write in continuation. I'm just writing in the side, so it will be easier for me to again come to the cycle. The first point that they can ask is the rate limiting step of urea cycle. The rate limiting step of urea cycle is CPS1. We have written in the pathway as well. CPS1 is the rate limiting step. If you see, I have highlighted 5 reactions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the yellow color. These are the 5 enzymes that are used there. What they can ask is, in the urea cycle, there are 5 reactions, or I can say 5 enzymes are used. What they ask is, what is the 6th enzyme of urea cycle? 6th enzyme of urea cycle. We are using only 5 enzyme, and what they're asking is, what is the 6th enzyme of urea cycle? What is the 6th enzyme of urea cycle? To answer this question, if you see the first reaction, in the first reaction, we have written a molecule with the name of NAG, which is the activator of CPS1. This NAG is also called as 6th enzyme of urea cycle. This NAG is also called as 6th enzyme. This is also called as 6th enzyme of urea cycle. So write down the statement here, 6th enzyme of urea cycle. It is NAG. NAG. Next is formula of urea. They can ask, what is the formula of urea? The formula of urea is NH2CO NH2 NH2CO NH2. This is the formula of urea. That this is the product that we were willing for the last 1 hour for urea. The formula of urea is NH2CO NH2. If you see the pathway, now everyone just pay attention on the pathway. We have started with 1 molecule of ammonia and 1 molecule of carbon dioxide, 1 molecule of ammonia and 1 molecule of carbon dioxide. If you see the formula of urea, what I can say is, this first nitrogen molecule, it is donated by ammonia. That is very clear. This CO group is given by the carbon dioxide. The point is, from where this second nitrogen is coming, because we have started only with the 1 molecule of ammonia and 1 molecule of carbon dioxide. 1 molecule of ammonia and 1 molecule of carbon dioxide. In the reaction 1, you can see we have started with 1 molecule of ammonia and 1 molecule of carbon dioxide. From where this is coming, from where this second nitrogen is coming, who is the foreign particle that is joining the urea cycle in the later part? The foreign particle that is joining the urea cycle in the later part and giving the second nitrogen is aspartate. Aspartate. This is the only foreign molecule that is joining the urea cycle in the later part. So this second nitrogen is given by aspartate. So they asked this question multiple times. They have asked repeatedly, who is going to donate the nitrogen of ammonia? The first nitrogen is given by the ammonium ion and the second is given by aspartate. First is given by ammonia and second is given by aspartate. Next is energetics. Energetics of urea cycle means how many ATPs are required. Energetics of urea cycle. See, to make you understand the energetics part, I just want to give you a simple concept. You must be knowing already. There are three forms of energy that we commonly we are going to use. If you are clear, there is no need to write this particular part which I am writing in the pink color. Adenosine triphosphate, diphosphate, and monophosphate. If you take ATP and remove one phosphate molecule, then it will convert into diphosphate. If you take ADP and you remove one phosphate, then it is going to convert into monophosphate. If you take ATP and you directly convert into monophosphate, then you are going to take out two phosphate molecules. This is a simple concept. Try converting into mono means you need to remove two phosphate molecules. You need to remove two phosphate molecules. If I apply the concept here, now everyone just pay attention on the reaction number 3. Triphosphate is converting into monophosphate. Means how many phosphate are missing, how many phosphate you are going to use. Two phosphate group we are going to use. So I am writing 2 phosphate. Minus 2 means we are using minus 2 phosphate. In the same way, if I say in the first reaction, you are taking 2 ATP molecules and you are converting into 2 ADP. How many phosphate are missing? Triphosphate is converting into diphosphate. But there are 2 triphosphate which are converting into 2 diphosphate. 2 tri converting into 2 di. So I can say again 2 phosphate are missing. If you see a simple mathematics, tri convert into di means 1 phosphate. But we are having 2 triphosphate which are converting into 2 diphosphates. So 2 phosphate are missing. So total how many phosphates are missing? Total 4 phosphate. Total first in the first reaction we are using 2 phosphate. In the third reaction also we are using 2 phosphates. So total phosphate used 3. Total phosphate used 4. Total phosphate used 4. Or I can say, if they ask total ATP used, how many ATP is used? If they ask the language in the question is total phosphate used, the answer will be 4. Total ATP used, how many? It is very easy to understand. In the first reaction, we are requiring 2 ATP. In the third reaction, you are requiring 1 ATP. So total, how many ATP is required? 2 plus 1, we are going to require 3 ATPs. So the ATP that is required is 3. But if they ask total how many phosphate is going to be required, it is 4. So you have to look for the question carefully whether they're asking for ATP or for asking for the phosphate. This is the energetics of the urea cycle. So these are the various questions that can be asked from the urea cycle physiology. That what is the rate limiting enzyme, sixth enzyme, the formula, what is the energetics part. The last topic that we are going to discuss from the urea cycle. It is with the name of urea cycle disorder. Urea cycle disorders. See, basically, in the urea cycle, what we do is we started with ammonia. There were 5 reactions. And after 5 reactions, ammonia was converting into urea. First reaction, second reaction, and so on. If any reaction is not occurring, let's say the first reaction, the name of enzyme was CPS1. The second enzyme was OTC. If any enzyme is absent, whether 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the ammonia is unable to convert into urea and the ammonia will elevate in the body. Let's say, for example, let's say there is a person who is having deficiency of CPS1. If there is deficiency of CPS1, means the reaction will not proceed. The urea cycle will not occur and the ammonia will accumulate in the body that will lead to hyperammonia. So the deficiency of CPS1 is called as hyperammonia type 1. Hyperammonia type 1 is due to deficiency of CPS1. Whereas if there is deficiency of OTC, OTC means ornithine transcarbamylase. Deficiency of OTC, ornithine transcarbamylase. This enzyme deficiency is called as hyperammonia type 2. Hyperammonia type 2. In the same way, we have hyperammonia type 3, 4, 5. But the important one is first and second. I want to add one more special point regarding hyperammonia type 2. No need to go into detail that from where this molecule is coming. Just remember directly. Hyperammonia type 2 is associated with orotic aciduria. You have to remember it directly. No need to go into detail that from where this molecule is coming, what is orotic acid. There is no need. Just remember directly. Type 2 is associated with orotic aciduria. There was a special transporter that we have used. For transport of ornithine. If you see the pathway, just pay attention. If you see this, ornithine transporter 1 is required for the transport of ornithine from the cytoplasm to mitochondria. Ornithine transporter 1. Let's say we are using the ornithine transporter 1 here. Here is your ornithine transporter 1, ORNT1. The pathology that I want to discuss from this particular part is if there is mutation in ornithine transporter 1, mutation in ornithine transporter 1. If there is mutation in ornithine transporter 1, again the urea cycle cannot occur because the ornithine will not go inside. If there is mutation in ornithine transporter 1, it will lead to something called as triple S syndrome. Leads to triple S syndrome. If there is mutation in ornithine transporter 1, it will lead to something called as triple S syndrome. Triple S syndrome is basically an acronym. Acronym means H. The first H stands for hyperammonia. The second H stands for hyperornithinemia. And the third H stands for hypercitrullinemia. Homocitrullinemia. Homocitrullinemia. So triple H is an acronym. The first H stands for hyperammonia. There will be increased amount of ammonia. In the triple S syndrome, there is increased amount of ornithine, and there will be increased amount of homocitrulline. I'm not going into detail that how these three will be derived from triple S syndrome because there is no need into going into that much of detail. As even in the PG exam, there is no need of knowing that from where these molecules are coming, how this homocitrulline will come into the picture. You just have to keep in mind that triple S syndrome is the H stands for hyperammonia, hyperornithinemia, and homocitrullinemia. These are the triple H. So this is the detail of the general metabolism of amino acid. These are the 4 steps by which how we are able to convert ammonia into urea. We will do some MCQs and then we'll take up your doubts if you have any. What is the meaning of isoelectric point? What is the meaning of iso? Iso means equal. Electric means electrical charge. What is the isoelectric point? Isoelectric point means the net charge will be 0. Isoelectric point means net charge will be 0. Net charge will be 0. Net charge is 0 for which ion? Yes, it is Zwitter ion. Net charge is 0 for Zwitter ion. When you transfer the amino group, you transfer the amino group from one amino acid to another amino acid. When you transfer the amino group from one amino acid to another amino acid, this reaction is called as what? This reaction is called as a transamination. Transamination. What is the mnemonic for transamination? Yes, we are going to use SOLP. SOLP. What is the coenzyme? Coenzyme is PLP. It also stands for vitamin B6. PLP or B6. What is the name of transporter of ammonia? The amino acid which will serve as a transporter or the carrier of ammonia from skeletal muscle. Who is going to transport the ammonia from skeletal muscle? Transport of ammonia from skeletal muscle all the way to liver. Who is going to transport this? The answer is alanine. Alanine is the molecule who is responsible for the transport of ammonia from skeletal muscle all the way to liver. If the same question is asked from brain, who is going to transport from brain to liver? Who is going to transport? Then the answer will be glutamine. Both the question already been asked in your exam. What is the name of transporter from brain? The name of the transporter from brain is glutamine, and from the skeletal muscle it is alanine. It's alanine. Ornithine cycle occurs where? Ornithine cycle is the other name of urea cycle. Urea cycle occurs in which organ? Urea cycle occurs in liver. If they ask mitochondria or cytoplasm, where? It is mito plus cytoplasm. Two reaction will occur in mitochondria, three reaction will occur in cytoplasm. Ornithine reaction occurs in ornithine cycle occurs in liver. Nitrogen atom of urea is contributed by nitrogen atom of urea. Urea means NH2, CO, NH2. Who is going to donate the nitrogen ions? The first nitrogen ion is given by the ammonium ion, and the second is given by aspartate. Aspartate. So the answer to this question will be ammonia and aspartate. The first will be given by ammonia, and second will be given by aspartate. This is how we have written the information. So in the next chapter, in the next class, we are going to discuss individual amino acid. In the next class, we are going to discuss individual amino acid. This was the general part of amino acid chapter. Now we will discuss the individual amino acid. The first individual amino acid that we are going to discuss is phenylalanine. Yes. So we will conclude the class for today here. If you have any doubt, you can ask in the chat box. Okay, I will show the first slide so that you can take the screenshot. I am showing the first slide so that you can take the screenshot. Even we started the today's class from the test. We have various tests. This was the first slide for today. First slide for today, we have discussed various type of tests that is done for a specific amino acid. You can take a screenshot. Then we have discussed about the buffer capacity. This was the second slide. Okay, so guys, keep revising the notes. Third ATP, okay, see here. In the urea cycle, how we have calculated the ATP. Now if we see, just see the reaction number 1 and reaction number 3. In the reaction number 1, how many ATPs we are using? In the reaction number 1, we are using 2 ATPs. In the reaction 1, we are using 2 ATPs. In the reaction number 3, we are using a ATP. So total how many ATP we are using? In the first reaction we are using 2 ATP, and in the third reaction we are using 1 ATP. So total 3 ATPs. Total 3 ATPs. In the first reaction, we are using 2 ATP, and in the third reaction, we are using 1 ATP. RLS stands for rate limiting step. RLS stands for rate limiting step. Rate limiting step of we have rate limiting step in each and every cycle. So the rate limiting step of urea cycle is going to be CPS1. Rate limiting means the slowest enzyme. Rate limiting means the slowest enzyme of the pathway is called as rate limiting step. Slowest enzyme of cycle or slowest enzyme of the pathway. It is called as rate limiting step. Slowest enzyme of pathway is called as rate limiting step. Slowest enzyme is called as rate limiting. Gitterine is made by that particular pH only. So that pH is important. Okay, so RLS stands for rate limiting step. Okay, so I'm not having any PDF. You just guys share the notes with one another in your group. I'm not having the class, and I'm not having the recording as well. So if you have any doubt, we can take up your doubts. Okay, I think you do not have any doubts. So keep revising the notes. We'll take the next class tomorrow. The timing, I will share the timing with you. Maybe earlier in the day, we'll share and we'll coordinate. Will be coordinated to you. Thank you.